City of Stevens Point Historic Preservation Design Review Commission meeting, recorded October 30th, 2024.
Call to order the Historic Design Review Commission meeting for September 30th, 2024. October, I should say. Yeah, you got September. Yeah.
October.
Roll call.
Siebert.
Here.
Monk.
Here.
Christensen is excused. Calnan. Barry, can you hear us? Oh, I have written sign off. McFarland is excused. Malepsky is excused, and then Finn.
Here.
Perfect. And we have 4 members, which is a quorum.
So Barry's on? Yeah, there he is. Hi, Barry.
Hey, sorry about that.
Okay, discussion, possible action on the report of the August 26th meeting of Historic Design Review. Questions, comments, whatever. I would entertain a motion to accept.
I will move to accept.
Second, please.
I'll second.
Okay, all those in favor, aye.
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 Okay. 3, presentation and discussion on historic draft preservation plan. Mr. Kuhn.
Thank you, Chair. So while I pull up the agenda that's included in the packet, I'm going to kind of just summarize while I get to that point. So as folks may recall, last time that we met, we had a rather lengthy conversation going over the draft preservation plan, going over really all the sections up to the implementation section. So this would cover items, more of the introductory chapters like discussion of the planning process, some key historical events here and point that's tied to preservation planning, social and cultural analysis of points, and a few others. The meat of the document, the meat of the meeting rather that we had last time we met focused more so on the goals, objectives, and policies chapters. So what we did was go through each of the policy recommendations and give an explanation of it, and then moreover kind of get a pulse from the commission as to, is this the overall intention of what you would like to see for each of the different topic areas, starting with the surveying efforts and priorities, and then kind of going down the line and making edits as we went along. So we had a pretty lengthy conversation, and we had a pretty lengthy list of recommended edits that you folks gave me. Those recommended edits were included within the latest version of the plan that's in the agenda packet for today. What I'd like to spend today going over is the implementation section, and then really getting a pulse from the group as to the document as a whole. If there's any major glaring concerns that you folks have with it, or do you think that we're in a generally good spot here? So I'm just going to share my screen just to be
I'll work it out.
nice here. There we go. So just to speak a little bit about the implementation section. So any long-range planning document, it kind of goes a variety of different ways in terms of how the implementation section is structured. Ultimately, the intent behind this chapter is to make sure that whatever policy recommendations that are identified within the plan, that ultimately there's a path set forward as to how we're going to achieve that recommended policy, right? I don't think any of us want to go through these efforts, the efforts that we've had over the last 9-12 months, and just let the plan sit and collect dust after, should it be adopted. So this section is really, I think, a section that's often overlooked, but is really, really important to make sure that we're doing our due diligence and implementing some of the recommended actions. So implementation section here that's on the screen and before you, it's broken down into each of the topic areas with each of the recommended policies within each of those topic areas, starting with the surveying efforts and priorities. You see each of the policy recommendations has a corresponding response given to the following, those prompts that's located on the top of each bar graph. How long, first being the timeline to complete, how long is it anticipated that this policy is going to be completed. For here, I kind of broke it up into a couple of different options. One, as you see, for primarily the educational section, there's a lot of ongoings just because there's that constant refreshing that's needed and constant work that's needed between you folks and I as city staff. And then the other sections are broken down into 1 to 5 years, 5 to 10, 15 to 20, and then I think there might be 1 or 2 that are a longer time span than that. Second figure talks about the cost estimate. Some long-term plans give a more specific dollar amount that's listed before that recommended policy. I'm thinking of like a recommended road project. Any transportation plan likes to give a specific dollar amount. I'm a little hesitant of that just because the estimated cost to do something always changes year over year, and I don't want it to be a situation where in 5 years' time the cost estimate for policy 3.4 is obsolete because just economic conditions that may exist at the time. So there I just broke it down into 3 options: low cost, medium cost, high cost. Partners, this is going to be the folks that are going to take the lead on implementing said policy recommendation. You see there's a number of these where it's city staff like myself and you folks as a commission who are going to be the lead players. As you can see, some other policies, there's other agencies involved like the Business Improvement District, Planning Commission, or what I lumped in together, the OCS means other community stakeholders. These would be groups such as churches, schools, community advocates, public organizations, and private organizations. And then lastly, the last item is broken down into a prioritization. There I just did a simple low, medium, high. How I got to selecting which policy recommendation is considered low or medium or high is a couple of factors. One, as you, I know Tim and Peter, you may recall from one of the workshops that we had in May, we had that exercise of asking folks, okay, with each of these topic areas, how should we prioritize each section? And the consensus that was given was the educational piece was ranked fairly high in terms of policies that we should prioritize versus that of others. Another factor was just kind of my insight as to what's considered easy to implement, right? Mm-hmm. If something's considered easy to implement, I'd rather fulfill these low-hanging fruits first, try to grab these low-hanging fruits first instead of trying to reach for the stars, reach for the hardest action item right from the forefront and risk potential murkiness in implementing the plan as a whole thereafter. So really trying to settle for some small wins to start.
Yeah.
So what I'm going to do here, I'm just going to separate this by topic area. I'm just going to keep it open-ended and kick it back to the 4 of you just for initial thoughts or suggestions or revisions that you want to see. And I'll start with the surveying efforts and priorities. So these would be the 6 recommendations in total. 5 of them are shown on the screen here, and then the 6th one is on the top of that second page. This would be page 78. I guess any questions or comments that you have?
Just like a pure editing, like
Extra space, I see.
The extra groups that we added into the draft, like the sake of continuity to include those.
Thank you. Yes, I gotcha.
Yeah, didn't we talk about putting women in that? Excuse me.
Yeah, it was women and LGBTQIA plus, I believe, were the 2.
Yeah.
Maybe one more that I'm thinking of.
Yeah, there were some that were added.
Was it the Dutch?
There might be one more, but
I can't remember.
Oh, Latin.
Latin.
That was what it was, yeah.
Any other thoughts from the four of you?
Does the owner of the intersection know about this?
Yes.
He does.
Yeah. Or if there's anything that you think in terms of the timeline or cost estimates, partners' priorities that you think is incorrect based on what's provided on here. Like I said, some of this is a little, especially the priority. I think the priority section there's a little bit of subjectivity to it. So if you folks feel there's a certain policy recommendation that should be rated higher or lower in terms of priority, by all means, this is the opportunity
How would,
to.
1.5, how would that be done? Through the state society or?
Likely what would be done is, so with the city being classified as a certified local government, this is basically the statewide accreditation that's had for preservation here in the state. Every year we're eligible to receive grant dollars for a variety of different efforts, including archaeological surveys. Archaeological surveys are rated the highest, if not the second highest, in terms of points you could get for that grant. So really, that would be the main source that I see of funding to get it, and then to fund that project, and then ultimately, should we get the funds, we'd have to go through a competitive bidding process to.
That's what I was wondering, is who would do it? That was.
Yeah, that would be really up to who submits proposals through an RFP.
Okay.
And for 1.4, just FYI, there's that space between.
Yeah, InDesign gets a little funky sometimes.
Okay.
Yeah, I noticed that when I was talking earlier. It's gonna drive me bananas.
What does EFF mean?
No idea. I guess if there's no other questions or comments for the survey and efforts and priorities, I'll kick it next to.
Does Barry have anything?
No, he messaged me.
All right.
So the next section then would be the local and national district nominations. Again, as you recall, some of these policy recommendations are similar to the last item, and some of these are, especially when we're having conversations about the Church of the Intercession Historic District and the Pine Street Plover Street Historic District, it's in part based off of survey needs that will have to happen first. So how I prioritize areas is basically conducting a survey by the year 2030, mid-2030s, I believe. But that should be one of the higher priorities, not only in the immediate term in terms of finding funding to finance that, but to actually make sure we're on track for that, since our next survey will be indicative in terms of any future district nominations that may or may not be had. So, otherwise, I'll kick it back to you folks for comments.
When you're talking about buildings, number 2.8, prioritize buildings of the city ownership. What about school district ownership, like PJ? Where does that fit in, I guess?
So, it technically doesn't fit in to policy 2.8. As far as the school district as a whole, PJ's would be the only building, at least in city limits, that would be eligible for listing on the National Register. Any of the other buildings, I don't believe would be eligible per our last intensive survey.
Okay.
Wouldn't, could we, policy 2.3 cover that? Promote that with property owners of historic sites to encourage local landmark designation?
Well, that's what I was
It
wondering.
could. Yeah, it could. Because ultimately, like, to get PJ's as an example, is considered historic because it's found to be meet the criteria needed for listing on the National Register. So, I mean, yeah, I think so. I mean, kind of what I mentioned in the past, the kind of the scope of the purpose behind policy 2.8 is to make sure that, if the city as a whole, city government as a whole, has an interest in maintaining and expanding our list of local landmark sites, I'm a pretty firm believer of leading by example, that the city has a number of municipal buildings that that are considered historic and would be eligible for listing, that the city should lead by example and put their money where their mouth is, so to speak.
When you say and properties, now that would include like Buchholz and Iverson or?
Yeah, so you have the option of listing a specific building or a property as a whole. So
Okay.
it'd be, I think the reason I put building and properties is just to maintain a little bit of flexibility.
Okay.
I know Barry said he didn't have any comments for this one. I
I'm
guess
just
the three of you.
wondering, like, if, I don't know, like, if it's necessary, but like, under that 2.3, like, in the document to, like, add something about, because that would.
About school?
About the school, because, like, I think that would, I think that's kind of like a weird case. Like, property owners being like a school district or not.
You think more than in the goals, objectives, and policies chapter to add a sentence.
Yeah.
Add a sentence somewhere talking about basically identifying that the school could be included in that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
In
because
that
it's not
discussion.
a private ownership, it's public.
Yeah.
But it's not government, city government.
Yeah, it's a unique entity.
So
Well-
basically public and private. Yeah, okay.
Well, if it would go into 2.3, promote dialogue with property owners, including local school district or something like that, of historic sites to encourage local landmark designation requests. I'm not sure if you've decided it belongs in 2.3 or just somewhere else, but.
I think 2.3 is a good
Even if you
spot.
just put including the Stevens Point Area School District or something like that. Or local school districts. This is countywide, isn't it?
And that would also include the university, wouldn't it?
Correct.
Old Main, Nelson Hall, that sort of thing?
Yeah, well, Old Main and Nelson are already
Right.
listed. There's a few other buildings, like the Comms building,
Oh, yeah.
Comms building, and I believe there's two other buildings that are eligible for listing that are not already.
The old Dillzell, or?
I should know. It's somewhere in the packet.
Yeah.
I should know. It's for sure the Comms building and two others.
Okay.
So, any other comments or thoughts or suggestions?
I don't for this part.
Tim, Janet? Next then, we'll go to the ordinance amendments. This was the one, I think, during the workshop in May that I referenced earlier, that the ordinance amendments was the section that was rated the lowest in terms of priority. So you see there's a couple of them that are listed as low. Most of them I put as medium, in part because the process of changing an ordinance to reflect these desired policies is relatively easy. So it's kind of a balance of low-hanging fruit, get some early wins, or versus that of, how much impact would it necessarily have? So
Also, reshaping ordinances would reshape what follows, right?
for sure,
Yeah.
for sure.
So to do that first.
Yeah, and so
or
that's why
early on.
That's why I picked medium as kind of that happy middle
Right.
for a number of these. There's a few that I think that I have as high just for the sheer reason of what that policy represents, like adopt a demolition delay ordinance, right? I'd rather have an ordinance in place before we ever have another request for a demolition,
Right,
just so that we
right.
have those safeguards in place to make sure that that's an option of last resort.
Economic hardship.
Yep, economic hardship, because that was specified frequently by folks as saying, this is what we want. This is something that I'd like to see.
Monday night, too.
Monday night, too.
That
Yep.
came up Monday night.
Yep. So, and like you said, some of these I also just gave an ongoing or 1 to 5 year timeline to complete, just because it's not that difficult in the whole grand scheme of things to do. So it more so gives us flexibility to decide when we want to do it. So thankfully, it's relatively cheap to change ordinance versus that of a lot of like educational initiatives and whatnot. So yeah, I'll kick it back to the group.
Do you guys have any questions? You two guys? Nope.
No.
Okay.
Listening.
Nothing?
If not, that's okay.
Zoning and development?
Yep. Okay, I guess seeing none, next will be then zoning and development. So this is the section, I believe, that had the fewest number of policy recommendations. This is one that I'm arguably a little biased on, just because of one of the many hats that I wear. Fits into zoning, but ultimately, there's some of these recommendations that, let's be frank, it's going to take a while to accomplish. I'm thinking of actually seeing the fruits of your labor for encouraging rooftop activation of historic buildings. The act of changing an ordinance per se is relatively easy, but the act of actually seeing the fruits of your labor in that change would take time, right? So that's why really 1, 2, and policy 4.1 through 4.3 are rated higher in priority than the subsequent two, really in part because of the impact it would have on the architectural guidelines, more immediate impacts it would have, and likewise as it relates to conservation districts. Early on in the process will be some community engagement with these impacted stakeholders. So that would be a reasonable or a potential next step based off of the conversations that are had with property owners of eligible historic districts.
Just my own clarification, 4.2. You were talking the other night about conflicting
Yes.
rules,
Yes.
like for signage or whatever. Is
Yeah.
that what this
That would be
is
that one.
designed to? Okay.
Yeah, so this is more just administrative tweaks. So like the example I gave on Monday was, there's a lot of situations where what's regulated by our zoning ordinance differs from what's regulated in our sign ordinance, our building code, our architectural guidelines for historic. The example I gave was projecting signs, that what we regulated in our sign code for how far the sign can project out from the face of the building and how high the sign can be from the sidewalk. What we regulate in our sign code is different than what our building code regulates, and is what's different in our architectural guidelines. So it's more just like bringing it all together, see what conflicts exist, and making sure they're all consistent with one another. And I put that as high because that bugs the heck out of me.
Yes. Yes.
If I'm going to be blunt. So, any other questions?
Now hearing, like, your reasoning behind, like what's medium, what's low, so it kind of makes a little bit more sense. I was going to throw in the policy 4.5 on affordable housing demand, and
Oh, yeah.
yeah, because I rent and I talk to a lot of people who rent, and I don't know if it's factual, but there is that perception that Stevens Point rent is high, and in my opinion, I think it would be good to use, for the city to use whatever it can to increase the affordable housing stock.
Yeah, and the reason I put 5 to 10 years for the timeline complete is in part because of the unknowns that are going to exist. As you
Right.
know, once you peel the layers of a historic building, so to speak, especially
Oh,
for
yeah.
interior work, you'll see a lot of
True.
surprises, and that's why I'd rather be a little bit more conservative with the timeline, just not knowing what surprises are going to be in store. And another reason, the type of residential use, i.e. if it's like a short-term rental versus that of a longer-term stay, has differing building code requirements for
Okay.
the interior of the space. And so that's where, it can get really thorny depending on
Yeah.
the type of housing that's being proposed. So that's why the timeline I gave as a little bit more extended than what I think most people want.
Yeah.
Well,
The priority, by all means, if you think that priority should be high versus medium, I'm not dead set on that.
Yeah.
Dead set.
Because like the timeline, now as you were explaining to me, I'm like, okay, that makes a lot of sense. But I still think it high, at least in my opinion.
Well, this is specifically on reuse of historic buildings, whereas the city is concentrating more on building affordable housing.
Okay.
We have those projects going now too, so that difference between new affordable housing that's being built by the city and housing provided by the reuse of a building. At least you're trying to do that. The city is trying to do that by the other projects that are going on.
Okay.
Did you want that as high, or are you?
I personally, I think it'd be good to have that as high.
Okay. Tim,
But,
Janet?
keep the timeline to complete, because, totally understandable.
Well, and what it says is encourage the reuse. So, so it's just, it's pretty easy to say, well, let's put that as a priority to encourage the reuse and remodeling of these buildings. But
I'm not one.
so it's not saying have it done, but rather to encourage it. So I guess changing it to high wouldn't,
Be a problem.
you're right. Yeah.
At least kickstart the conversation.
Yes.
There's no other comments for the zoning and development section. I'll go then to financial assistance. This was an area where I think you see some consistency in the priorities being high and the timeline to complete being relatively low. Really given the priority, from the priority standpoint, heard a lot of comments saying that is one of the biggest barriers for folks to do work on a building, is just the cost of it. So, and the timeline to complete, there's a number of funding mechanisms in place to expand and or create new financial assistance programs, and so that's where there's options available. It's just a matter of kind of hunkering down and figuring out what source of funding would be most appropriate. And as you can see, the partners really for a lot of this is just the city, because a lot of these would be city-led initiatives. So,
Where would nonprofits fit into this in terms
Kind
of the facade grant and all that sort of stuff?
like what we talked about on Monday.
Yeah.
That would be 5.1. I would
It
put
would
that
be
up there.
5.1,
Yeah,
okay.
I think that's the clearest route, at least immediately for the short term. Potentially 5.3 for creating a revolving loan fund. Ultimately, should a revolving loan fund be created, it would be the work of this commission and the finance committee to ultimately create the program, the loan requirements, the program requirements, like what's going to be the interest rate, what's going to be the minimum asking amount. So, that would be another opportunity to include in there to say, if there's an appetite for including not-for-profit organizations as being an eligible applicant, you could fit it in there too. Likewise, potentially 5.4. I mean, that's a little bit more of a gray area. Yeah, I'd say 5.1 and 5.3 would be the clearest.
So based on what came up the other night, that gentleman that was sitting behind me,
Yep.
distinction between non-profs and religious non-profs, like St. Pete's, would that still be 5.1?
I mean, I think it could be both. 5.1 would be an immediate impact, and it's a relatively simple tweak since it's a program that already exists and can have some immediate impacts. The revolving loan fund would be more of a long-term strategy, just because you'd have to hash out the program requirements, set aside funds through some funding source to help fund help finance this revolving loan fund. So, yeah, I mean, I think in a nutshell, it could fit within 5.1 and 5.3. It's just a matter of 5.1 being more short-term impacts versus 5.3 being more long-term impacts.
Okay.
Any other thoughts?
No, looks good.
Okay. As barring none, then I'll jump over to tourism. This is one where I purposely gave a longer timeline, in part because, as folks know, there's ample work that's needed to create an effective tourism strategy and kind of build the infrastructure in place to support that type of programming. So that's why the timeline to complete for most of these is a longer period of time. The cost, there's some degree of ambiguity in terms of how much it would cost. That's really based in part on how big of a chomp from the apple do you want to take in terms of any one of these policy recommendations? How elaborate do you want to be in, say, creating or assessing our historic buildings and determining what contributes to our local tourism efforts and what does not? There's some ambiguity in terms of what's the scope and scale of that project. So yeah, I think that's kind of all that I want to say. I mean, it would be more of a city and outside agency collaboration that would take place. This is one where I don't necessarily see it'll be a crazy amount of involvement from this commission. Not saying it's a knock on you folks, just that there's other community organizations that are more versed in tourism strategies. By all means, the connector, how it ties into our historic buildings, so identifying those historic buildings, that's definitely something where you folks would have more expertise on. So I will kick it to the floor.
I don't have anything to add.
Would we were talking the other night about all of the photos and whatever the city owns. Wouldn't that fit under tourism?
Yeah, it could. There's a few of these policy recommendations that could fall under more than one topic area.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say you could tie that into 6.4. Depending on the scope of the grant application, 6.3 could. For sure, 6.2 would. A virtual walking tour. I mean, depending on how much info you want to have on that walking tour, if you want to include photographs, that's an easy get.
Or 6.5.
6.5 as well. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Any other thoughts? Next then would be the sense of place. This is, an area focusing more on kind of the streetscape enhancements. Here you can see on, when you're talking about any sort of streetscape improvement, all you hear is ka-ching, ka-ching, ka-ching in terms of costs. So you can see one common parallel is that this is one of the more expensive topic areas to fulfill. And accordingly, there's a longer timeline to complete just because you're going to have to set aside funds either internally or through some outside funding sources to finance that project. So, and priority, you see most of these are either low or medium. Not saying that these policy recommendations are bad by all means. It's just because there's some ambiguity, some unknowns because of the cost and the funding sources that can be used to fund said project. The priority just in and of itself is tampered down a little bit. So, kick it to the crew.
Well, and I see with the sense of place ones, a lot of these also are, if the DBI wants to plant flowers along Main and Clark Street, that comes up with them. If UWSP wants to improve the landscaping, those kind of partners, it can come from them also. And it may, once they see this plan, then they may see, oh, okay, we're on there for something that we could do to pretty up the place.
Yeah.
And, and then it would not be that difficult of a thing. None of these are that difficult to actually get done. Maybe somebody's going to see, oh yeah, painting the Church Street underpass, I'll do it. Pay me $500, I'll do it.
Yeah.
So those are all neat ideas, but also if they're put in front of the partner that's mentioned in the narrative rather than in the graph, they may want to go ahead with it.
7.2, the business with the underpass. There is an Art Deco structure just to the south of the underpass that could be highlighted somehow. What is that structure?
That would be on the east side of the street, right?
No, west.
West side. Oh, that is so that is a more hair salon on the
No, it's right next to the underpass.
next to the
And
other.
it's got a stop and go light on the top of it for some reason or another. But it's Art Deco. It looks like it's just a tower.
If that's the one I'm thinking of, that might be tied to utility stuff.
Okay.
I believe, because I think there's a similar tower, a similar type structure on the underpass by Michigan. Maybe not as decorative,
I was gonna say, this one is
not that
concrete.
type of exterior facade, so to speak, but
But is it the Art Deco thing? You could
Yeah.
do something with it.
yeah, I think that's more, if I'm thinking of the right one, I think that's more utility.
Utility? Okay.
Based.
Okay.
The sense, we're on sense of place, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
The one sense of place that I think should be high, after hearing about, like Eric's family member and that sort of thing is the thing on the ADA, and I think that should be higher, because especially if there's owners of businesses, if people are complaining about the lack of ADA and they're talking about historic preservation being the reason why, I think that would be, clearing that up and getting something in place or something like that should be high.
Higher. Medium or high?
I think high.
Tim, Janet?
Sorry. I don't know why it does that.
Okay.
Since that kind of conscientiousness should just be
Talking about
across the
7-6.
board for everything in the city.
Yeah.
I think you could label that high, because that should always be, the ADA access should always be something that's taken into consideration.
Because I just,
So why not? Yeah.
I think to get ahead of I don't know, I could definitely see a situation where somebody's like, oh, it's because of historic preservation
Right.
that I can't, well,
Put this ramp in or.
well, yeah, no, and I think that would be good to head off of that potential issue.
Okay. Any other comments then for sense of place?
That's it for me.
Okay. So then the last one we'll have then is the education and advocacy. So this is the one that I mentioned earlier, that a lot of these are ongoing, just because you should always have that constant reminders, so to speak, that constant work being done for a number of these recommendations. The cost for most of these, honestly, are not, it wouldn't be that exorbitant to fulfill. Some of this is more just city-led initiatives that can be done in-house. So from a cost standpoint, it's relatively low, and the priority levels, you can see there's a mixture of low, medium, and high. Really, the high ones were based off of the comments received during the workshops earlier this spring. So for the last time, I will kick it back to you folks.
Just in terms of PR, during the city's 125, we had a Century Homes project. So people would fill out, if they owned a particular building, they would fill out the history of the building, and if it met certain criteria, they would get a plaque to put up on the building. And that was really successful. So it was great for city PR, that sort of thing.
That plaque program is under the tourism too. Is that the same thing that you kind of mean, Tim? Create a plaque program to
Similar.
showcase historic buildings?
Similar, yeah.
Yeah.
Not exactly the same.
I mean, that definitely is something that.
I mean, I know it
would
wasn't the exact same what you did already, but
Okay.
yeah. But if it falls under that.
fall. And that plaque program, I know it's under tourism, but I mean, there's an educational component,
Right,
of course.
exactly, right, yeah. I really like 8.1, when somebody buys a new house, if it happens to be an older home, and just letting them know that, hey, this is, in our historic district or in one of our historic houses, and here are resources that are available to you if you want to do, if you need help with maintaining or fixing it. I really like, yeah, that's a great policy.
So what's the reason that, 8.5, I'm just curious, the
Yeah.
reason this was never included in the city's, you said that all the other commissions are.
All the other commissions except for redevelopment authority, I think the reason is, I don't know exactly, is because ultimately the decisions that are made by this commission, or backtrack, this commission by and large has final authority for the areas that you can garner a decision on, i.e. Conformity with your folks' architectural guidelines for a given project. You're the sole entity that gets to approve or deny that. Ultimately, there is the appeal process through council, but that's unlike a conditional use permit where it has to go before plan commission and council. Even if our plan commission would say, yes, we're going to recommend approval of granting this conditional use permit, it's solely a recommendation. It still has to go before our council for sign off. So I think the reason why the minutes are not included, have not been included in there historically, is because there's really no actions that are brought before the council anyway. So what's the point?
I guess informational mostly.
Yeah, and I think that's really the purpose now of, should you include the meeting minutes and a council agenda? It's more so that, just informational, than needing to take an action on the request located in a given meeting minutes.
Okay.
I guess if there's no other questions for the education and advocacy topic, that really covers the remainder of the plan. I know there's an appendix section right after that, but that's more just kind of fluff at this point, like we're excited, right? Stuff like that in the whole grand scheme of things. So I want to kick it back to the four of you and ask kind of like big picture, looking at the plan as a whole. As I mentioned, the comments that you folks raised during our last meeting, that was incorporated within, those edits were made, and that's incorporated within the most up-to-date version on the city's website. I guess comfort level, are there some bigger issues that you still see with the planning document that you're not comfortable with taking action on it? Or do you folks think, you know, with the revisions that we discussed this evening, that, you know, there's a sense of comfort that you're willing or you're ready to take action on it?
Seems pretty comprehensive.
The reason I'm asking that is ultimately when the time comes and you folks are ready to take action on it, we have to have a public hearing and we have to schedule that like a month in advance.
Yes.
So that's kind of the reason for the ask is, are you comfortable to move forward that the next time we meet would be to take action on it, or are there certain areas that you still that you'd like to cover?
Just these minor tweaks we did tonight, I don't see any other problems.
Same.
Otherwise, the fact that you've modeled this, as you explained when you first introduced it to us last month, you've modeled this after what other cities are doing, and that this is the way of the future, that if cities that don't have this kind of plan, it's more and more so they're realizing that and realizing that they need to do that. And so, and the fact that you were able to use some of the models of cities that have done this and it's successful and that it works and how it's organized, I think too gives, at least me anyway, a lot of confidence in how you put this together and how it comes across and what it's proposing. So, yeah.
So I think the last question I'm going to ask you for, I'm going to also follow up with the email since there's 2 or 3 other members of the commission who are not here, but the earliest that that we as a commission could convene while meeting the public notice requirements would be, really the earliest that we could meet would be either that Monday and Tuesday right before Thanksgiving, the 25th and 26th, or the week after. So I want to ask you, like, I kind of have a hunch it's going to be no for that Monday and Tuesday. The reason I'm asking this is that, you know, ideally we would have, it's not a requirement per se, but ideally through my mind, this commission would take action first, followed by our plan commission, followed by council at the very end. If the 25th and 26th, the Monday and Tuesday right before Thanksgiving would not work, then how it would be set up would be plan commission would take first action on it. That would be on December the 2nd, and then you folks would take action on it second. That would be sometime thereafter, and then should both bodies approve of it, it would be on the council agenda for the 16th of December. So I guess if that week of the Monday and Tuesday before Thanksgiving does not work, are you okay with plan commission taking the first action on it? You know, keep in mind the scope of this plan as it relates to that commission is going to be more so that zoning and development section.
Would plan commission be okay with that? It seems like that's sort of a little feels backwards. But what if you did like you have done before, where you emailed, and if you at the very least get a quorum, and it sounds like it's not going to be a long meeting, it's more like it would be giving our approval, and the importance of getting that done before the already scheduled plan commission meeting is why you wanted to do that.
Not by email, no.
No, but I mean to ask who can come.
Yeah.
And to
You're
ensure that
asking
there's a quorum.
That Monday or Tuesday before.
Exactly, because
Yeah.
I would be able to, so.
I think for me,
It's
Monday.
Yeah, Monday. It probably makes more sense to do it, us doing it first.
That would be
Yeah.
ideal for me. I just know,
Doesn't feel comfortable.
obviously, the Monday and
other way.
Tuesday before Thanksgiving, schedules get very wonky. You know,
Yes.
if you're, I don't think this really applies to any of you folks, but if any of you folks are a deer hunter, I apologize. Or shall I say, I hope you have your 30-point buck by then.
But at the very least, all you'd want to do is ensure that there's a quorum, correct?
A quorum,
Right.
obviously, I'd like it that as many of you can attend as
Sure.
possible, but,
Sure.
you know, ultimately, if there's not any major concerns, you know, there's still a public hearing, so, you know, you have to follow through that process. Folks are able and provided the opportunity to speak, but the sole action that would be taken, the sole item that would be on that agenda would be the public hearing and possible action.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be adding anything else on the agenda, so,
So Monday,
I think Monday.
okay, would be ideal.
25th.
Okay.
be the 20, what?
That'd be November 25th.
26th.
Like I said, I'll reach out to the other folks probably tomorrow. I'll still copy you guys, you folks on the email as well, but if it works for the 25th, great. If not, then, you know, I think to address your comment, Janet, you know, is the Plan Commission comfortable with it? You know, I think they're kind of gonna ask the same question, but in reverse. If Historic is comfortable with it, that, you know, they're ready to take action on it, I think that would give a sense of comfort for them to take action on it first, if that's needed. So,
Tim, you sort of didn't like the idea of flip-flopping it though either, correct?
Correct.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And cart before the horse sort of thing.
yeah. Okay, I'll send out an email, and then I guess the last thing I'll just mention to piggyback on that is, you know, Plan Commission would be on December the 2nd. If you're free and able or want to attend and provide comment, you as a commissioner, you're more than welcome to do so. Likewise, the council meeting, when, you know, should both commissions recommend approval of it, you know, you folks are more than welcome to attend those commission meetings if you so see fit. So, with
Okay.
that, I got everything for me.
Anybody else? We are adjourned.
A video of this meeting is available for viewing on the city's website, stevenspoint.com/videos.